2 years ago, just before Thanksgiving, I was privileged to participate in a visit to West Bank, Palestine by 31 American rabbis to witness efforts of grassroots organizations of Israeli Jews and Palestinians to alleviate the daily oppression of Palestinians by border closures, Israeli settler violence, and police brutality. I came away from that visit with the realization that Israeli Jews had little understanding of the oppression facing Palestinians and had little, if any, interest in hearing about it. I shouldn't have been as shocked as I was by this lack of interest. Look at the way the Black Lives Matter movement has awakened some white Americans to the daily fear and oppression faced by blacks in this country. Where were our heads and hearts before? And where are the heads and hearts of those who decry critical race theory in this country and continue to work to block black citizens from voting? And with the horrors of 1,200 Israelis slaughtered and several hundred taken hostage on October 7th, this lack of empathy has only increased. Omer Bartov, a former member of the Israel Defense Forces and a professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University, described as an Israeli American, writes of, quote, the utter inability of Israeli society today to feel any empathy for the population of Gaza. The majority, it seems, do not even want to know what is happening in Gaza, and this desire is reflected in TV coverage. Israeli television news these days usually begins with reports on the funerals of soldiers, invariably described as heroes, fallen in the fighting in Gaza, followed by estimates of how many Hamas fighters were liquidated. References to Palestinian civilian deaths are rare and normally presented as part of enemy propaganda or as a cause for unwelcome international pressure. In the face of so much death, this deafening silence now seems like its own form of vengefulness. Of course, he writes, the Israeli public long ago became inured to the brutal occupation that has characterized the country for 57 out of the 76 years of its existence. But the scale of what is being perpetrated in Gaza right now by the IDF is as unprecedented as the complete indifference of most Israelis to what is being done in their name. In 1982, he writes, hundreds of thousands of Israelis protested against the massacre of the Palestinian population in the refugee camps Sabra and Shatila in western Beirut by Maronite Christian militias facilitated by the IDF. Today, this kind of response is inconceivable. The way people's eyes glaze over whenever one mentions the suffering of Palestinian civilians and the deaths of thousands of children and women and elderly people is deeply unsettling. He continues, meeting my friends in Israel this summer, I frequently felt that they were afraid that I might disrupt their grief, and that living out of the country, I could not grasp their pain, anxiety, bewilderment, and helplessness. Any suggestion that living in the country had numbed them to the pain of others, the pain that, after all, was being inflicted in their name, only produced a wall of silence, a retreat into themselves, or a quick change of subject. The impression that I got was consistent. We have no room in our hearts. We have no room in our thoughts. We do not want to speak about or to be shown what our own soldiers, our children or grandchildren, our brothers and sisters are doing right now in Gaza. We must focus on ourselves, on our trauma, fear, and anger. All the more so, of course, There was no empathy or sympathy on the part of West Bank Palestinians for Israeli Jews after the October 7th massacre. In 1956, Moshe Dayan, then the Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff, spoke at the funeral of a kibbutz security officer who had been killed the day before, and his body dragged across the border into Gaza and mutilated before being returned to Israel with the help of the United Nations. In part, he said, "Why should we blame them for their burning hatred of us? For 8 years they have been dwelling in Gaza's refugee camps, as before their eyes we have transformed the land and the villages in which they and their forefathers had dwelled into our own property. We should not seek Roi's blood from the Arabs in Gaza, but from ourselves. How have we shut our eyes and not faced up forthrightly to our fate, not faced up to our generation's mission in all its cruelty? We are the generation of settlement. Without a steel helmet and the muzzle of the cannon, we will not be able to plant a tree and build a home. Our children will not have a life if we do not dig shelters. And without barbed wire and machine guns, we will not be able to pave roads and dig water wells. Millions of Jews who were exterminated because they had no land are looking at us from the ashes of Israeli history and ordering us to settle and resurrect a land for our people. But beyond the border's furrow, an ocean of hatred and an urge for vengeance rises, waiting for the moment that calm will blunt our readiness, for the day that we heed the ambassadors of conspiring hypocrisy who call upon us to put down our arms." He spoke these words 68 years ago. Since then, the bomb shelters in Israel have proliferated, and there is no rest. Sarah Tuttle Singer writes a blog on the Times of Israel news site and explains the unsettled nature of life in Israel. Have you ever thought twice about getting on a bus? Or have you ever gotten off the bus in the middle of nowhere because a man gets on wearing a bulky jacket on a warm spring day? Do you wake up every morning and before doing anything with only one eye open, check the news and call the people you love the most, and instead of asking, "Hey, what's up?" you say, "Where are you? Are you safe? Did you hear? How many dead?" Does a low-frequency sound, a vacuum cleaner, a motorcycle, the hum of the washing machine, make you look frantically around for shoes and jackets so you can run to the shelter, even though this time it's nothing because you spent too long where it was something? Have you watched the sky explode as Iran sent hundreds of drones and missiles to kill you? Have you ever walked through neighborhoods and hated yourself for not trusting your neighbors? And while you keep going because you believe in the goodness in people, do you still feel sick to your stomach when you find out that a 13-year-old boy was knifed in the exact same spot where you stood exactly 24 hours before? Do you sit with your friends and talk about the near misses? I should have been on that bus, but I was hungover and I slept through my alarm. So if you're still there, she writes, and if you're still truly listening, please, if you want there to be a just and peaceful resolution for everyone, if you want to end the occupation and see everyone treated equally, remember this and understand why it isn't simple for us. It is crucial to grasp that our history as Jews in Israel is intertwined with unyielding fear and a relentless yearning for quiet. This fear shapes us. It defines our decisions and it weighs on our hearts. Yet we insistently look for ways to embrace life too. We go out, we talk to strangers, we keep trying to shine our light in a world where the darkness can feel unyielding. If you're committed to a just and peaceful future for all, please recognize that the road isn't straightforward. Our pain is deep, our memories are raw, and the scars are all too real. But if you're willing to listen, truly listen, and share in the burden of this pain in its unbearable weight, you can help us take the brave and necessary steps toward a future where peace isn't just a distant dream, but a reality for all, truly all. In addition, and what's bewildering and frightening to me, is the anti-Semitism that has erupted around the world since October 7th. Anti-Jewish incidents in this country skyrocketed 360% in the 3 months following October 7th. College campuses in particular have been frightening places to be Jewish. American students have been hounded, harassed, and at times physically harmed because they are Jewish. Men have been advised to hide their kippot, women in their Star of David jewelry. Less than half of Jewish students reported feeling safe on their college campuses this past year. I just read that Alex Karp, the head of Palantir Technologies, has offered 180 jobs to Jewish students who are fearful of staying in college. High school seniors have added to their criteria for where to apply. Where will I be safe and comfortable as a Jew? As American Jews, we thought we were in the safest diaspora community in the history of our people. We have learned that there is only a thin veil hiding covert discrimination against our people in this country as well. Who would have thought that a war 6,000 miles away would unleash such hatred on American Jews? Yes, we can talk about Israel and Palestine, but in this lose-lose situation, we pose the wrong questions when we ask who is right and who is wrong. We pose the wrong questions when we ask who is the victim, who is the perpetrator. Faced with the tragedy and travesty of mass destruction in Gaza, the tragedy and travesty of a Palestinian governing body that does not support the people's needs, whose sole purpose is to destroy its enemy, no matter the human cost to its own people. The tragedy and travesty of an Israeli government focused on destruction and retribution rather than rescue of hostages, relief to civilians, and an end to occupation. Last night's Times of Israel headline was, "At the weekly Hostages Square rally, protesters demand elections as hostage families seethe. You could have saved them." Faced with the tragedy and travesty of an international movement to uplift Palestinians that sees the only solution as the destruction of Israel, the tragedy and travesty of the destruction in Gaza used as the excuse for persecution of American Jews, of British Jews, of French Jews, we pose the wrong questions. We pose the wrong question when we ask, are you pro-Palestinian? Are you pro-Israel? Are you pro-humanity? I am struck with hope by the work of Standing Together, a group of Palestinians and Jews in Israel. They write, "The months following October 7th have been one never-ending nightmare in the loss of life across the land, both from Hamas's horrific October 7th attack and Israel's harsh and indiscriminate retaliation on Gaza. In the occupied West Bank, military raids and settler violence have become increasingly frequent and fatal. Israeli communities along Israel's northern and southern borders are still displaced. Northern Israel has seen constant rocket fire from Hezbollah, including last night, and Israeli hostages remain in captivity. Our message is simple: there is another way. We are focused on building the political will in Israeli society to reach a political solution by building a mass movement of Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel who truly believe that such a shared future is possible. In May, they write, we launched the Humanitarian Guard, where we have brought Israeli activists to Tarkumya checkpoint to guard aid trucks headed to Gaza from extremist settlers that came out to attack the trucks. Standing Together has organized the biggest demonstrations calling for a ceasefire agreement and hostage deal since October 7th, drawing tens of thousands to the streets across the country. As Rav Kook taught in the Fourfold Song, we must strive to be the person whose soul is so broad that it expands beyond the border of Israel, beyond the border of Palestine, beyond the border of a particular nation or people, but live the song of humanity. This soul constantly grows broader with the exalted totality of humanity and its glorious image, yearning for humanity's general enlightenment. May we remember that each person we meet is created in God's image. May we continue to have hope, and to demonstrate that hope not by seeing in black and white, not by favoring the lives of some over the lives of others, but by working for peace and justice for all humanity. Thank you.